coming to you live from the heart of the free state of New Hampshire. This is The Independence with Carla Garrick. And now, here's your host, Carla Garrick.
Hey, hi guys, and welcome back to The Independence. It's Monday, which means I am here to tell you what's coming up this week in the great free state. As it is on Mondays, I should come with a fasting warning. So you have been warned that I might be either too fast or too slow. And if you are wondering whether fasting might be a good option for you, I am happy to talk to people about it. So if you want to better understand what the benefits and health benefits of fasting could be in your life, please do reach out to me. You can always reach me at carla@carlagarrick.com. All right, it is the week of January 19th, and it is going to be a busy week here in the Free State. We got, I don't know, between 6 and 10 inches of snow, so I'm sure everyone is already kind of like knee deep in this week. For some people, today was a holiday. It was Martin Luther King Day. Most of us had to work and shovel snow. And now we are here at the end of a long day, and I want to tell you what's coming up. The first thing you should do right now, if you're watching this, is please go buy your Porcupine Day tickets. Porcupine Day will be coming up on the 3rd of February at the Murphy's Tap Room and Carriage House in Bedford, and tickets are on sale now. There's a $50 general admissions ticket and then a $100 VIP ticket. What is Porcupine Day? Well, of course, it is where we celebrate triggering the move and thereby triggering the statists. So it is a fun gathering. There's usually 100, 150 of us who get together. There'll be light finger foods. There will be a little speechifying. There might be a little celebrating, maybe a custom drink. So get those tickets and do come out for that. It is on a Tuesday, so we'll be swooping in the Taproom Tuesday crowd, which of course is an event that has been going on for close to 18 years now here in the Free State. I have some bills that I'm working on, and I will be telling you guys a little bit more about those. But first of all, here's just some quick news about things that happened in the past week. Now, if you're new to the Free State or you're just kind of watching from the outside and you're kind of wondering what we're doing here in New Hampshire, I think one of the best ways to think about it is that liberty is a lifestyle in New Hampshire. And what do I mean by that? I mean that, we have all moved here. We've all intentionally chosen New Hampshire as our home, and we all bring different talents. And part of that is looking at what bills are coming up, what's happening up at the State House, what the politics are. But other parts of it are also just how are you leading your life here in New Hampshire? So every week, things grow on the politics side, but also on the culture side. And the most important part to know is Free Staters are at the center of all of that. If you're not getting Eric Brakey, our executive director at the Free State Project's newsletter, please do sign up for that. You can go to fsp.org and do that. But he summarizes every Sunday kind of what's happened, what's coming up. And so I use that for my crib notes. But here's some important things that have happened or that are happening. First of all, the campus carry bill, which I told you guys about last Monday, cleared its key committee. So it came out of committee with an ought to pass. What is that? That would be saying that the Constitution applies everywhere, which it should, right? The Constitution should apply everywhere or nowhere. So by that, it means that if firearms are legal to be used and carried anywhere, then they should equally be allowed to be carried on campuses. So this was basically legislation to abolish unarmed victim zones on taxpayer-funded colleges. So if you're a private college or a private home or a private property, you can decide what people can do on your property. But since the universities are taking tax-funded money, then they should comply. We have some exciting news to announce about the speaker at Liberty Forum this year. Liberty Forum will be taking place at the Grapponi Center in Concord, March 5th through the 8th. That is a really good conference. If you're like Liberty curious, or you're like, what are those Free Staters on about up there in New Hampshire? Then this is a great event to come to meet the community, find out the things we're interested in, find, kind of your niche within the groups. And I'm delighted to announce that Scott Horton, Cut His Teeth Anti-War, Libertarian Institute, he will be our keynote speaker at the 2026 New Hampshire Liberty Forum. And you can get your tickets for Liberty Forum also online at fsp.org. So what are you going to do right now? You're going to go to fsp.org, get your Pork Day tickets for the 10th annual Pork Day. So for 10 years, we have been triggering the statists here in New Hampshire. And while you're there, get your Liberty Forum tickets. And if you can, buy the VIP tickets, support us. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, educational nonprofit. So, of course, your donation can be tax deductible as well. All right. Are you a Porcupine patron yet? And if not, why not? We have hundreds of patrons. Eric worked really hard at the end of last year to push that number up. We have special perks for our patrons. You can become a Porcupine patron for as little as $10 a month. So go ahead and go do that as well. A couple of other things, and then we'll move into these bills that will be coming up this week. The Architectural Digest featured the FSP. I mentioned that last week. So this is one of the most long-standing, sort of prestigious magazines, very pinky up. They had a lifestyle magazine, and they had and featured 5 different people who were moving to different places for their preferences. And Eric, our ED, our executive director, he was featured as one of the people, of course, having moved from being a state senator in Maine to New Hampshire to come spearhead the Free State Project now. So that was a really exciting and great article. They did a bunch of great outreach over the weekend to Maine gun owners. So volunteers traveled to that. Why is that important? And how can you, that's the kind of stuff your patron pledge supports. And why is it important? Because this is where we get our hot leads, so to speak, right? So, for example, last Thursday, right here at the Quill in West Manchester, we did a calling party, FSP volunteer calling party that takes place once a month on I believe it's the 3rd Thursday of the month. But you can check fsp.org/calendar if you want to see what exactly is coming up every day of the month. And at that calling party, we get volunteers in. Last week, there were probably 8 of us around. I'm not sure everyone was doing calls, but there was a good group. We bring in some pizzas or some takeout or whatever. It's a good way to help, but also socialize. And I was given a list of 10, 12 names, and I called my list, and they were all solid numbers, i.e. I either spoke to the person or I left the message, and the name and the number correlated. And everyone I spoke to was really excited to hear from us because they could remember actually meeting our volunteers. They knew it was at a gun show or it was at this, expo or whatever it was. And it was really great to be able to talk to people, to tell them what we're up to here, to invite them to our events, whether it's Pork Day, Liberty Forum, Pork Fest coming up. There's FSB DAC always in October, various other things that different groups are constantly putting together here in New Hampshire. And so I'm inviting you as you watch this, come visit us. And of course, if you live in the state, I expect your fullest practical effort. So, what does that look like? Now, those words, right? Fullest practical effort, those words come from the original pledge. That was the pledge that is now actually back on the website. So, if you're feeling compelled to, show your druthers and show your street cred, go ahead and sign up for that again. But for me, my fullest practical effort has involved deciding which choice issues I'm interested in and working on those issues. Now, for other people, it might be gun rights, or it might be education rights, or it might be parental rights, whatever your flavor is. For me, it is open government, so open, transparent government. So a lot of work around RSA 91A. And then independence work, because yes, I do think we'd be better off without the yoke of the federal government around us. I believe that the federal government is a sinking ship, and looks like the silver price agrees with me, So this week we have a few bills coming up that I am interested in. Before I deep dive on those, I do want to say this paperwork over here is all the NHLA recommendations on what to oppose and what to support this week. So if you're not actually subscribed to the NHLA newsletter, that's the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, please go ahead and support them as well. Here's the beauty. Over the time I've been here in New Hampshire, we have become really the organizations doing choice little pieces of this big puzzle, which involves how do we make New Hampshire the freest place on earth. And so I'm, for the first time, actually in an enviable position, I think, to afterwards, Alex will be like, that wasn't a word, Carla. Sometimes it's not a word. I'm doing my best, guys. But the NHLA is doing a lot of the work to make your job easier, so they can tell you, hey, sign in for this bill. Don't sign in for this bill. So make sure you are getting that information and that you are raising your voice and making your contribution to this great project we're doing here in New Hampshire. So there are two bills coming up on Wednesday that I want to highlight for you, and then there's one on Friday. The bill on Friday is 1441. That is the Independence Study Committee bill, and I'll give you a little bit of details on that. But the two on Wednesday that I'm interested in are both related to open government. So here in New Hampshire, we have RSA 91A. Many of you may be familiar with FOIA, right? That's a term you hear a lot. That is the Federal Open Government Information Process. And so our local FOIA is 91A, and that is our right to know. Now, I serve now after many years of just serving in the trenches. I'm now the president of Right to Know New Hampshire. So we had our monthly meeting last Saturday. That's always the third Saturday of the month. If you're interested in getting involved there, come to some meetings. We do it via Zoom. I try and keep it on point. We're just going through the bills and kind of coming up with what our positions are. So these two bills on Wednesday, the one is HB 1746 and the other one is HB 1587. So I actually sent in a letter to the editor at the Union Leader this morning, just kind of saying, saying, yo, hey, everyone should be supporting these bills. Why? Because we want government to be open and transparent so that we can hold it accountable. You can't make changes and you can't reform things if you have no idea what your government is up to. And so, HB 1746 is saying that if there is a tax funded investigation, then we should be able to 91A that investigation. So, and by that I mean the report. So currently, they'll pay to have investigators come in to maybe look at a malfeasance. Sometimes it's a personnel matter, sometimes it's just following the money. But somewhere along the line, someone has done an investigation and created a report. This bill will say if it's tax funded, then it's subject to 91A. Then we can ask for it and we can get it. And maybe there are a few little things that need to be redacted here and there for privacy reasons, but we would like to see the report. This is sort of an add-on for what it's worth from the Fenneman case, which was overturned a couple of years ago at the New Hampshire Supreme Court. That case took 36 years to overturn, if I'm remembering the numbers right. And I'm emphasizing that because that's the frustration of incrementalism and the government and trying to fix problems and all of that, because it can take a really long time if a bad decision is made to fix it. So in that Fenneman case, what the court said is instead of it just being that personnel matters are now always hidden from the taxpayer, the court found it's a balancing act. So if there's a public interest in whatever the information is, then there's a balancing act between the privacy of the government officials and the people, the public, trying to get the information. So that was an actual improvement on the sort of wholesale, no, you just can't get the info. But this bill is now trying to sort of codify and maybe make it even more formal. So taxpayer investigations subject to 91A. This is a bill that should be supported by the press. I know I worked with many reporters who were asking for something like this. And of course, it makes perfect sense to all of us. We're paying for it. They're investigating something that went wrong. Isn't the entire point that we should know what it says so that we can make sure that it doesn't happen again and that we right the wrong? So that's what this bill is trying to do. That one will be heard on Wednesday at the Judiciary Committee. All right. So basically, this bill will prevent secrecy, which of course undermines trust and accountability. The other one on Wednesday, and I think this one might rustle some jimmies, but I also think that maybe we're going to get some bipartisan support for this one. So 1587 makes body-worn camera footage presumptively public under the right to know law. So currently there's, and honestly, guys, this bill, the 91A, really needs to be overhauled. And anyone who's watching this who has the appetite to work with me to do that, I would appreciate it, because we now have exemptions to the exceptions or exceptions to the exemptions. The whole thing has become very muddled. And so the way in New Hampshire it currently works is if a officer's body cam is recording, the only time those recordings are subject to the 91A, i.e. subject to open government requests, is if there was an excessive force, or a discharge of a firearm, and or if you were involved in a felony arrest. But we know there are many other instances where things have happened or where you maybe just want the footage for whatever reason. And here, I have a little side quest story. Many years ago, my neighbor's house not the actual house, but his fence was on fire, and it was during COVID. And basically, my husband and I put out the fire before the fire truck showed up. Somewhere between when the fire truck showed up, the po showed up, they wanted to go onto his property. And I was like, no, the fire is actually on the school side. On the other side, you guys should go back around. The police officer was fairly insistent to sketch the scene. I was in maybe like one level up from pajamas, but I was cooking. I remember I had an apron on. When I realized everything was going down, I actually grabbed my gun and I like had it like just in a holster around my waist. And I had like 5-gallon jugs of water, and I'm like running, and the cop's like, no, I want to go on the property. And I'm like, no, you can't, right? So at the end of that whole saga, I was talking to an officer, and I thought our exchange was really illuminating. And actually, I thought, oh, this would be cool. I'm going to totally 91A this body cam footage, because he told me at one stage, he's like, hey, I have to tell you, you're being audio and video recorded. And I was like, yes, you are. And then I told him about my court case, which we will get into with Seth Hipple, who was my lawyer on the Friday night, the Independence After Hours, this coming Friday. And so I thought afterwards, I was like, oh, that'll be a great little video to get to make it an educational moment where I was like, oh, I was telling the cop about my case. He was telling me about like his stuff. It was just a good moment. So I sent a 91A request to the police. And of course, they immediately responded and told me to go pound sand. And they were like, no, body cam footage isn't subject to right to know. And I thought that was curious, and it kind of irked me. They framed it, which irked me even more, that it was a privacy concern for the citizens. And I was like, well, if that's the case, I waive my privacy rights and then give me the footage. And then they were like, no, but it's also his privacy and blah. And of course, on the job, on the record, you don't actually have citizens' rights while you're working for the government. So this bill is going to make it, 1587 is going to make it that it mandates disclosure with only targeted redactions in the case of, say, minors, or say a sexual assault case or something. And it gives them 5 business days to respond, which is the way the right to know bills work now. And it builds basically on my case to extend it so that we would have oversight for official recordings. The idea there, of course, is to deter misconduct and to ensure fair policing. And we do know when body cam footage was originally, or the cameras were originally introduced, I would say probably now more than 10 years ago, I think it was in Rialto, California, but I stand to be corrected. Within the first year of those cameras going into operation, excessive use of force complaints dropped. And so the body cams are, yes, helpful for us as the citizens, but they also are helpful for the police. And so we are creating these records. And we can't just create a world where we have roving police officers doing the panopticon on their footsies without us also having the right to take a look at that footage if we want to. So both these bills promote openness without really compromising anyone's rights in any way. And they, of course, absolutely 100% align with the New Hampshire Constitution, which, of course, does give us the constitutional rights to open, transparent, accountable, and accessible government. So I hope if you're watching this, maybe come to the State House. Actually, it's not at the State House. All the hearings have been moved to Granite Place. I believe the address is 1 Granite Place in Concord. I haven't been there yet, but they moved it from the LOB, which was the Legislative Office Buildings, to this new building. If you can't make it, maybe go online, sign up, sign in for testimony, send me a DM, let me know. I'd be happy to be like, hey, 15 people watched this and told me they are in support of this bill, and I will add it to my testimony on Wednesday. While I think of it, then also on Wednesday, when I usually record my show at the Manchester Public Access television station, which is 1 o'clock on Wednesdays, I was like, man, did you guys plan that? So I couldn't either go to the State House or I have to flip my episode, but we're going to either record from home or do it early or do it on the fly, but something will happen or there will be a repeat of last week's. All right. Before we dive into the secession bill that is coming up on Friday, I wanted to remind everyone that education options fairs are taking place. This is EdOpt. This is an organization spearheaded by Jody Underwood. My husband Louis serves on the board and various other Free Staters. The goal of this organization is to help you figure out what's going to be the best education option for your child. She's doing these little fairs regionally. The next one will be on Monday, January 26th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Claremont Community Center in Claremont. That Wednesday of the same week, January 28th, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Dummer Town Hall. And then on Thursday, January 29th, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Loyal Order of Moose Lodge in Dover. So do go to EdOpt. And, Jody was saying she gets lots of people with lots of questions. People are like, should I take my kids out of public school? Yes, you should. And then if so, what are my options? What does homeschooling look like? What does charter schools look like? Private tutoring? I actually just saw a tweet the other day, which filled my heart. It wasn't in New Hampshire, but I'm sure people are doing this here as well, where years ago when we started testifying on the school choice bills for these education freedom accounts where the money follows the child, we had posited, hey, you could, if you're a teacher who's in a public school, you could, if you're the good teacher, right, who's stuck in this red tape and the dynamic at the schools don't seem that great and there's violence and infighting and bullying and, all that stuff, you could actually go and become a private tutor. And let's say you had this $5,000 from the education freedom accounts, the money follows the child. You could decide, hey, I'm going to have 5 students. I'm going to have the parents pay me directly, and I'm going to only teach for 2 hours a day or whatever makes sense, right? And then you could actually create your own little private mini pod school. And those things are also allowed here in New Hampshire. So the tweet I saw was for a different state, but all the good ideas start here in New Hampshire and then eventually go to some of the other states that are trying to keep liberty and human flourishing in the front of their minds. All right, this last thing I want to cover today is, let me just double check if I got everything else, is House Bill 1441. So many of you may recall we have put in independence bills over the years. The initial bill was a constitutional amendment that said, hey, we should put the question of New Hampshire independence to the voters of the Granite State. And of course, we should do that. And if you're a legislator, I am of the position you don't have the right to tell us we can't put it on the ballot to have us as the voters of the state decide. It is not a question that should be put to the State House. It's a question that should be put to the voters. So that was CACR 20, if I remember right. Then we listened to the feedback that we got from people in Concord, and we decided, okay, we're going to put in another constitutional amendment proposal, but we'll add a triggering event. So we said in the event that the federal national debt reaches $40 trillion, then we could put the question to Granite Staters. That one also got, crushed, if we're going to be candid. But the other part of the feedback was, how would this work? And this bill, 1441, is designed to answer those questions. So this is an act establishing a commission to study the economic, legal, and sociological aspects of New Hampshire exerting its sovereign states' rights. So basically what this talks about is we would set up a commission. The governor would appoint some people. Senators would be on there. Senators can appoint private citizens. The House can appoint some people. Anyway, we're going to get a big group of people together, and then we're going to go, what would it look like if New Hampshire was its own little country? And my grandma, it's always better to be prepared and to not need it than to not be prepared. So whether you think this is a fool's mission or not, I think there are valuable things that could come out of this exercise to really help us understand and grapple with what this future could look like. So here are some of the questions that the commission would ask and explore. So things like, what would be the fiscal implications of New Hampshire exerting its sovereign rights, right? What currency would an independent New Hampshire use? Now, many of you may know that last year, Keith Ammon passed a bill that made 5% of public funds in New Hampshire can be held in Bitcoin, gold, silver, or platinum. There is a bill currently up at the State House to try and make gold and silver legal tender in New Hampshire. I think that one's going to have a hard time, but we keep doing these creative little bits, and together you start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And again, you never know when you might actually need the answers to this question. I mean, come on, guys. Maybe if this Greenland plays for real, we could be like, okay, take Greenland and we'll just go our merry way. All right, so things like, how would interstate travel and commerce be managed? That is a legitimate question. Would New Hampshire have to defend itself against domestic and foreign threats? What would happen with Social Security and Medicaid? Now, that's a question I often hear. And simply put, expats get their Social Security in Mexico and in Colombia and other places where people go to retire. So I can't imagine why it couldn't work as well. It's just a question of appetite. What would our domestic energy policy look like? There's an appetite up at the State House, and Kelly Ayotte has come out firmly in favor of nuclear. And as we see this need for energy start to take off with AIs, I think people are coming around to the realization that you can't actually run our energy needs on windmills. And so nuclear, I think, is going to make a big comeback. Some of the other questions were, how would residents opposed to independence be treated? I hope well. I mean, I think that should just commonly be a thing. We should be trying to treat each other well and not with disgust and hate, as we so often see in the political realm now. All right, so there are several other questions. I'm not going to go over all of them. This bill will be heard on Friday, also at the Granite Place. And I hope people will come out in support of it, or even just to come see, what the flavor is, who's into this idea. I suspect this probably will struggle again. I think we had maybe 23 people vote for it last time. I'm not sure what will happen, but if we could get an ought to pass out of the committee to at least push the issue, keep the issue in the news. There's another resolution that Glenn Bailey put in on behalf of Nexit, which just is a resolution saying, hey, we would support the right of California to go its own way. The idea there, of course, is to get people more comfortable with the idea, because if you feel as a maybe a Democrat right now and you have Trump derangement syndrome and you're like, yeah, California should totally be able to be its own place, I'm like, I actually agree with you, but then let's make it consistent and then say we as Granite Staters might have that right as well. You know, there are independence movements all over the nation, and many of them have different flavors. Some are progressive, some are conservative. Hawaii's is cultural. And I would say up here in New Hampshire, it's the live free or die ethos. And so, you know, let's keep the story in the news. Let's keep it in the front of people's minds, and let's keep trying to answer the questions so that should it be necessary at some stage, we would be ahead of the curve to solve problems as they might come down the pike. There's a lot going on, as there always is in the Free State. I didn't even get into the calendar today, but of course you can always go to fsp.org/calendar. That will give you every day in the state what's going on. There's stuff at the Independence Inn. There's stuff at the Shell. There's stuff at the Quill. There's always something happening. And if I leave you with one thing on your minds, please, please, please go buy your Pork Day tickets so that we can start to finalize the arrangements there. And I can't wait to see everyone at Porcupine Day for our 10th annual celebration of triggering the move and bringing all these liberty lovers home to New Hampshire. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's edition of The Independents. I wish you peace, love, and understanding, and I'll see you guys back here again next Wednesday.